Hello, I'm Barry Hans from CalderLead, and I'm going to be talking to you about selling lead. Lead's been in the construction industry longer than most, and a lot of people think that an alternative has been found. I mean, it was being used by the Egyptians 7000 BC, but its history is important to you because it's referred to chemically as Pb, and Pb comes from its Latin name plumbum. And this symbol here is still being used today. It's the symbol for Saturn because the alchemists of old related the 7 known metals to man to the planets. So here you have old Septicus Tancus, who was a plumbarii because he's a worker in lead. And plumbarii has now become plumber. So really all the plumbers you're dealing with should be lead workers, but they're not. We've also been in the business a long time. Isaac Cookson started our works in Newcastle upon Tyne in 1703, and we're part of the Calder group of companies who are the largest manufacturer of sheet lead for building in Europe, with plants in Ireland, France, Germany and Holland. We're also a very green company. We were recycling scrap before it became fashionable to be green. And as you can see, we take scrap, we produce it into the product that you're familiar with, it then goes onto the houses, it comes off older houses back into scrap, and the cycle continues. What's important to tell you is why the codes 3 to 8 originated. And what we have is that when people who sometimes still refer to £3 lead, it came from the fact that it was measured by the weight of the square foot. When we went metric, it was then related to the thickness, and as you can see, the thicknesses are shown. This is the manufacturing plant that we're using in Newcastle, and Phil here on the console is ensuring that the thicknesses are correct, because they have to be correct to plus or minus 5%. This machine can produce 3 metric tons of finished product every 12 minutes. And we load it onto the pallet in this form, and when it comes out, it has to be shrink wrapped. It's important that the lead is kept dry, and I'll come to more of that later. We've over 250 years experience in lead, and we're very proud of our claim that nobody knows more about lead than we do. Well, we're associate members of the Builders Merchants Federation, and this demonstrates our commitment to the merchant. We only sell our product via merchants. Now, when people are selling lead, they tend to think that this is the sort of property that all lead goes on, and that isn't true. This is the workaday world of lead sheet, and as you can see, it's around the chimney and around the windows and the valleys there. And this particular building, look, there's a lot of lead on this one. Now that's a nice new building there, but this is where the lead that's used each year in the UK, which accounts for 100,000 tonnes a year just in the UK. Who's using lead? This is where you come to who your customers are likely to be. It isn't anymore only the plumber. It's roofers, builders, the specialist leadwork contractors tend to do the church that you saw earlier, mechanical contractors. Now remember, these are the heating and ventilating specialists who are always bodging a hole in the roof, so there's a need for them to put a flashing round. Acoustic engineers is fairly simple, they're making sandwiches for sound attenuation. But double glazing and conservatory manufacturers, installers is big business because they're invariably putting something to a building and they need to prevent the ingress of water. And remember, the lead's only there to prevent the ingress of water. And it's put there by people who haven't been trained. And my friend here, Bodger Bill, as you can see, he's rolled out a roller code 3, he's nailed it all down the edges, he's into a problem. He doesn't know about expansion and contraction. And if you don't take this into account, you will have a problem, as you can see from this split. Now, lead expands and contracts, and you have to allow for that. Because summer to winter, a 2-metre piece of lead will want to move 3 millimetres. And in the expansion and contraction, that means it's got to move 6 millimetres. Now, you can see that. That's a big movement. And because lead is soft and malleable, and it doesn't have the strength to move in the expansion and contraction, you have to allow for that, which means that lead's got to be fixed in short pieces. So that you can see here in figure 1, if you're doing a porch over the door like that, and it doesn't exceed, for example, in code 4, 1.5 metres in length, then it can be done without a join. As soon as code 4 goes over 1.5 metres in length, you've got to put a join. And figure 3 shows the chart that the bigger the piece of lead that needs to be used, the thicker the material must become. And in figure 4, that's an interesting one, because I did mention people who are installing windows. This is a very popular fixture now where people are having these windows put in, and this bay has got to be put in there, and it's done in lead. It's such a common feature that the GRP manufacturers actually make a product like this as a substitute for lead. So if you're talking to a client and you know he fixes windows, he's a target for a possible purchase of lead. So you can see how important it is that the expansion and contraction is taken into account. A typical misuse of a 6-metre roll of code 4 cut into 3 by 2 metre pieces, and as can be seen here, they will fail. What you can see now on this lead roof here is this isn't one large piece of lead, which a lot of people tend to think it is, and that this design here is just because it looks good. But it's to enable that lead roof to be made up of lots of small pieces which are only fastened on one edge, which allows for the expansion and contraction. Now, this brings us to an important part of this presentation where we really want everybody to think that when they're selling the roll of lead, they can say to their client, what are you doing with it? Because when you know what he's going to do with it, you can either help him by saying, don't forget it's got to be kept in short pieces. And also, if he then says, oh no, it's only flashing and I'm turning it into the brickwork, then we can say, well, if you're turning it into the brickwork, the industry recommends that joint isn't mortared, because the mortar's always falling out. And if you look at where lead work has been turned into the brickwork, you'll see that the mortar's constantly falling out and has to be redone. So the Lead Sheet Association has developed that it is done with a sealant, so that if the guy's saying to you, I'm only turning it into the brickwork, you can then say, oh, you want some sealant then? Patination treatment should always be used. We now have a water-based treatment that is quicker drying and does not react with bituminous products or sealants. Here's a good example showing that where there's a small flat lead roof there and the water's run off onto the roof, there's quite severe staining. And I've used this to contractors and they say to me, oh, I can see there's a need for it there, Barry, because there's a big piece of lead up there, but we don't do that sort of work. We're only fitting flashings, and you don't need to put patination oil on flattings. And of course that isn't true, so I've had to say, oh, you mean like this? You're doing flashings. So now you can see that you as the seller of lead have got an opportunity of, he's bought the roll of lead, but if you ask him, what are you doing with it? You can say to him, oh, well, you're turning it into the brickwork, I've got the sealant for you. Oh, you need to put patination oil on. And if this was in a very severe exposed position, he'd have to clip that flashing in place. And remember I talked to you about heating and ventilating engineers or people who are bodging a hole through the roof? They need one of these. We sell thousands of these. And unless you ask the guy, have you got the lead slate because you're buying the flue that we know you're going to poke through the roof, there's an opportunity for another sale. And when we come to clips and nails, I visit loads of trade counters and I'm constantly told by people, Barry, I've been on this trade counter 10 years and I've never been asked for clips. And they make the assumption they're not used. Or that lead clips are made. However, clips in lead are only suitable for sheltered exposures. Now, I'm not showing you this slide because it's a job that's gone wrong, but this is where nature's intervened, and it's given me a superb example to show you that the roll of lead has been purchased from you, and on its own, you can't use it. In actual fact, a roll of lead on its own has only got one good use, and that's for propping the door open, because he's got to cut it up into bits and then use something else to use it. Now you can see that he knew about the expansion and contraction. It's been cut into short pieces. He's needed wood core roll to create the ridge, and he's had to have clips in order to hold it into place. But it's because he didn't use the clips properly that it came off. But what I'm able to show you on this slide here is that he's bought the roll of lead, he's had to have wood core roll, he's had to have clips. He clearly put patination oil on because it hasn't stained the roof, apart from where he didn't do the 50mm underside where it's left a line. Now this slide, at least this guy used nails and held it into place. But again, look, He clearly used patination oil because there's no staining on the roof. But he has also used wood core roll, copper clips and nails. Look at this one. This piece of lead down here is supposed to be up here. Even the nails have to be put in properly. If you just put a straight line of nails, you've actually created a perforated edge. And without having the clip holding the weight, it'll wobble like that and tear off. The nails have to be put in properly in this fashion. Now, by asking the question, what are you doing with the lead when you're buying it, leads you to be able to offer help and advice and the added value products. Even this simple job, where the guy has put the lead in, he's turned it into the brickwork, hopefully using the sealant, but what he's actually created is a horizontal lap joint. Now, horizontal lap joints won't prevent the ingress of water, because water will line it like a step and it'll go through. All he needed, if you'd been able to say to him, what are you doing with this, and advise him that a little wooden fillet would have then allowed him to create a vertical lap joint, he wouldn't have had a problem. I'm using this one, I know it's an extreme one, but I do want to get across how interesting it can be to say to people when you're handing them the roll of lead, what are you doing with it? Because this is such an exposed position on a museum roof in London that the architect particularly wanted to ensure that it didn't blow off the roof. Look how many clips there are. Now, when the guy sold the rolls of lead, and there was a lot of rolls of lead, they didn't bother to say, what are you doing with it, and try and get the added value opportunities. There's more clips there in the tin copper clips, which gave an opportunity for a better margin on the clips than on the lead. Now I hope you're beginning to see that really I'm talking about making money. And when we're talking about making money, you want to consider how you sell the lead, because here you've got, on the left, a ton of lead. Now, you clearly only value that by working out the weight and giving the guy, well, I'll give you so much a ton for that. But here, you don't want to sell that by the ton. The guy wants to know it by the roll, so sell it by the roll, not by its weight. Now you can see that we're into performance. We want to be that bit better than other people. And I put this in because it amuses me. Every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up, and it knows it must run faster than the fastest lion or it'll be killed. And every morning in Africa, a lion wakes up, and it knows it must outrun the slowest gazelle or it'll starve to death. Now, it doesn't matter whether we're a lion or a gazelle. When we get up in the morning, we've got to be running. We've got to outperform our competitors. So we come to ask a question. And as I've said, this is the ideal opportunity to ask the question. We've done this job. We've done the flashing. We've done the patination oil. He's turned it into the brickwork, and we've sold him the lead sheet sealant. Even on the roof, look, where he's come through, we've sold him 2 lead slates. And if it was an exposed position, clips. And while he's looking at the drawing, we can say to him, what is it you need for your next job? Can we work out what it is? And if we haven't got it here, I'll get it for you. Don't wait till he comes up to the trade counter and says, have you got this? And you go, oh, I can get it for you. Find out before he wants it. So we then come to the guidelines just to go through it. And as you can see from the first paragraph, we're saying here, there's more lead sold over trade counters in odd rolls than the accumulated volume of the specialist leadwork contractors who are doing major jobs. And in order to get a good share of this business, you've got to carry a good stock. Now, when you've got a good stock, let people know you've got it. Don't run out before you reorder. You wouldn't believe how many people do. Guy comes in and he wants 5 rolls or something. They go into the warehouse. They've only got 2. I can get the others for you. You lose an opportunity. So don't run out before reordering. And as I've said, ask what's required, because it then gives you the opportunity of the sealant, the patination, or the clips. Now, when you come to letting people know you've got the product, there's nothing better really than the product. You don't need fancy stuff from the supplier to say this is in stock. And here we've got, on a very small area, the rolls of lead, the clips, the patination oil and the sealant, and a handful of nails. What we do have that's unique to us is the Calder Guide to Good Leadwork, because you now know that what I've been telling you about means that when they fix the lead, they've got to get it right. And this little booklet which we've produced and we've printed over 1 million copies which are in circulation with various different tradespeople to ensure they get it right. This gives you an opportunity of identifying a lead purchaser. He may be in your store buying something completely unrelated to lead, but whilst he's there and he sees that you've got the Guide to Good Leadwork available, and he'll go, "Oh, can I have a copy of that Guide to Good Leadwork, please?" And you can say to him, "Well, certainly. You're going to use some lead then. Where will you be getting it from? Can we do it for you?" We also put the technical information on posters that can be available in your point of sale. And what I would recommend is, rather than trying to spread them all along the wall, there's only 6 posters, put them one behind each other so that one's visible. Then after 2 or 3 weeks, when somebody's seen it, and put it to the back, and then at number 2, so that it's several weeks before number 1 comes back. But they're all still there, so that when the guy comes in and says, "Can I have a look at that detail about clips?" or whatever else, fixing a valley, it's there. Now also to help you, we've got signs in plastic that you can put outside on the fence or on the wall which states CalderLead in stock here. It is important to let the people know you've gone to the trouble of stocking it. And we've also got the board which you can put up on the wall which says we've got the Guide to Good Leadwork here. I do have a duty of care which I would like to go through with you because I think it's important. There are a lot of stories about lead where people get alarmed, but the product you've got is not harmful, unless you drop it on your foot, of course. But what you've got to take into account is that lifting it carefully is fairly obvious, except that it's very dense. And what people tend to do is they go to pick it up, not realising it's going to be heavy, but that's an obvious one. The one that isn't obvious is don't smoke. Because what people are then doing is lead will become hazardous if you eat it. And they're handling the lead, they've got lead on their hands, they're not going to get a problem with lead on their hands because it won't ingress through the skin. But if they light a cigarette and they get the lead onto the cigarette and they inhale, or if they're eating an apple, or even if they put their hand to the mouth when they're giving you directions, they shouldn't be doing that. So all you've got to remember is that when you've finished handling the lead, you wash your hands. The points that I've been talking about are covered in the Guide to Good Leadwork. But if you do have further questions, and this is about asking questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Because by asking the questions, your customer will benefit, I'll benefit, but you will benefit by getting more product over the trade counters. So thank you for watching. I hope you found it of interest. Goodbye. Visit our website at www.caldergroup.co.uk.